Arceus decks were nowhere near the most popular for the Hartford regionals, and yet somehow remained the talk of the entire tournament. Hey, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we're going to be talking about all things Arceus VSTAR. Personally, I love the deck, and it's really interesting some of the developments that have happened to this deck over the past couple of months. This weekend was the Hartford regionals, and I went. I didn't play TCG. I actually played VGC because I had $70 to waste, and it was a lot of fun. But really, the highlight was everyone who came up and said hi to me during the event. That means so much to me. You really have no idea. Every time I go to any event, you are what makes it so much fun, and why I have so much enjoyment, and why I continue to make content. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now, we're going to take a look. We're going to go to Trainer Hill, and we're going to take a look at all of the information we need to know about Arceus decks, if we're going to play one, how we're going to beat them, how popular they are, all that kind of stuff. So let's get started. So here we are, Trainer Hill, link in the video description. Please go check it out. It's a fantastic site. Anyway, we have the meta share. The highlighted decks are the Arceus decks, and really, we're just talking about two of them, the two really popular ones. We have the Arceus Giratina, and all the way down here, we have Arceus Duraludon. And Arceus Duraludon is actually the one we're going to talk more about. There are other Arceus decks. We have Arceus Regidrago and Arceus Goodra, but as you can see, they're really not very popular, especially compared to something like Arceus Giratina, especially in the last week or two. The overall is for the last 2 weeks, and then you have past 7 days on the right. This is for tournaments with 30 or more individuals, standard format, of course. So Arceus Giratina, Arceus Duraludon, they're relatively popular. The decks that you have to consider, decks that you have to think about. But if you went to Hartford, for some reason, I feel like everybody I talked to either was playing or had played against Arceus Duraludon. And of course, the one tournament that I don't play TCG in, Arceus Duraludon's everywhere. A deck that I can absolutely destroy, no problem. It's just, God, of course, it always goes that way, right? But anyway, so Arceus Giratina is pretty popular. I mean, it's top 4 deck, so something you definitely have to know. But still, look at something like Lost Zone. The Lost Zone decks are still 15+% of the meta. In the last 7 days, you're looking at 17% of the meta. So these Lost Zone decks are what we really have to prepare for. And Lugia has also picked back up in popularity. You can see in the last 2 weeks, it's the 3rd most popular, and this past week, it's been the 2nd most popular. And if I remember correctly, it was the 2nd most or 3rd most popular deck at Hartford. It was actually the 2nd most popular deck at Hartford this weekend. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at the day 1 meta for Hartford. There was 1,058 master trainers. Lost Zone deck, again, 20% of the meta. Lugia, 14.5, so about 15%. Then Gardevoir at 13, Mew at 12, Arceus Giratina at 8.5, and Miraidon at 7. Interestingly enough, Miraidon, something that hasn't done super well, still part of the top 5 most popular decks, or top 6 most popular decks in the Hartford Regional. So interesting to see. At least that's the day 1 meta. So where do we go from here? Well, why don't we take a look at how some of these Arceus decks are built. Now we kind of have an idea of how popular things are. We really have to look out for Lost Zone, we have to look out for Lugia, we have to look out for Gardevoir, maybe Mew. Those are like the 4 I would really focus on. And now we can take a look at these Arceus decks, see how they're built, and then see how they do against some other decks. So Arceus Giratina is the most popular Arceus list, so we're going to start there. And of course, we have a 4-3 line of Arceus VSTAR. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? In every single Arceus deck, your number 1 goal is to get an Arceus and an energy turn 1. That is like an absolute must. You really don't want to start something else. Maybe you want something else in the active, depending on what you're playing against, but you need an Arceus and an energy on the field turn 1. It's kind of guaranteed, which is really the problem with Arceus decks, and same thing with Lugia decks, right? Lugia and Arceus both suffer from the same thing. You need the Arceus or you need the Lugia in play guaranteed that first turn. Lugia is a little bit easier because you don't need an energy. It's nice if you have one, but you don't need an energy since the Archeops can power up your Lugia, whereas Arceus needs the energy because you have to get 3 energies onto it in that second turn so that you can start using Trinity Nova, or at the very minimum Trinity Charge. I mean, that just doesn't feel well. Trinity Charge really only works turn 1 if you're going second. You attach a DTE, you could Trinity Charge. That's actually not bad, but if you go first, if you're Trinity Charging on your next turn when you could finally attack, it's a real bad time. It just doesn't feel very good. So anyway, Arceus Giratina, 4-3 Arceus. We got the Bibarels in there. We got the 2-2 Giratina. And we have the 1-of Skwovet. And there was a regional. I don't remember which one. It was very recent. And Arceus Giratina, the person, they played the Skwovet. They used the ability to shuffle your hand, put it to the bottom of the deck, and then draw 1 card. And they needed to find an Arceus VSTAR. And they did. They found the VSTAR right off of that Skwovet, and I think that really sold it for a ton of people. It's just an extra thing. What you can do in really nice combo is you can shuffle your hand. Let's say you have a bunch of cards in your hand. You can especially, this works especially well with if you have a bunch of energies in your hand. You can shuffle that hand, put it to the bottom of the deck with Skwovet, draw a single card, and then use Bibarel's Industrious Incisor ability to draw until you have 5 cards in hand, which means you just got to see 5 new cards. It was really, really good. You didn't have to discard anything. You didn't have to waste a supporter for the turn. You just used a little squirrel and a beaver, some woodland friends to get the job done. Arceus is great. We already talked about Trinity Charge and Trinity Nova allow you to accelerate energies to your other V Pokemon, so we can go ahead and attach them to itself. Other, Arceus V's on the bench, our Giratinas. We could even power up a Drapion. You can see it in the other common cards. Really nice for the Mew matchup. But you can go ahead and power up the Drapion because Mew often plays a lot of Path to the Peaks, and you need Drapion's ability to, make the most use out of it. So if we go ahead and put that Drapion on the bench, well, now we powered up with 3 energies. The next turn, we just attach an energy for turn and then attack with the Drapion, and it's kind of the same thing. There is always a chance it gets boss KO'd, but that's not the point. What we really want to do is just kind of lock the game down. You can see there's a really high path count. We have 3-4 paths in there. We have a lot of judges, 4 judges in the deck. I mentioned Mew being, doing like they play a lot of path and they also play judge. Arceus Giratina is the better judge path deck. If you are trying to lock your opponent out of the game, you want to keep them from setting up a strategy, this is the deck to play, because we can go ahead and accelerate energies with Arceus. We have Giratina just hits super hard, and we have the Bibarel so that even if we judge ourselves into like a not great hand, if we can Ultra Ball it away, we get rid of 1 or 2 cards, we can then Bibarel and fill it back up, and it's just really good. We have a couple of trekking shoes in there, some researches. We have everything we need. The Rhyon's a great card, as is the Choice Belt. All of those things really matter. That Giratina having 280 damage, now you get the Choice Belt on there, you're able to knock out opposing Lugias with a V-Guard energy on there, opposing Arceus V-Stars with a V-Guard energy, you're knocking out Mew, you're doing a lot of stuff. 310 is a really good number to hit. I'm pretty sure Gardevoir EX has 310 health as well, so that 310 does really matter, which is why most of the time they're only playing 1, but you do see a couple of lists having that second Choice Belt in there, just because they really value hitting 310 specifically against all those V-Stars with V-Guard energies and a few other really high health Pokemon. Lost City's an interesting card to throw in there. I don't know how necessary it is. You can see it's really not being played as a lot of these other common cards. Really, the ones that get the most use are something like the Cleansing Gloves. We go ahead and we get the Power Pad, the Serena. Those are the more common tech cards, but really 58 cards as our core. If you were to wanted to say, I want to play Arceus Giratina tomorrow, here's 58 cards, and then you can go ahead and get 2 cards from that other common list, kind of throw them in. Personally, we have a 3 count to boss. I think that's quite a lot. I don't know that we need the Serena. I would definitely run the Pal Pad, and then maybe the Cleansing Gloves, or maybe a second choice belt, or like how many switches do we have? One switch. Maybe I do like a second switch or like a second pivot option, just so I don't get stuck with like some type of what's it called, like memory skip nonsense. I want to be able to move things around. I want to be able to make sure that I'm not discarding energies too much, because Giratina does have to Lost Stone some energies every time I use the attack, which is kind of annoying. So maybe pivoting might be a little bit more important, but either way, you get the idea. This deck can absolutely crush if you really wanted to. I think Sharon's Care is an incredible card for this deck, and that could be a really good option with Palpet if you want to cycle through some Arceus. You can go ahead, send up an Arceus, attack, power something up, power up another Arceus on the bench, use the Sharons after it gets damaged, bring it back up, and just now you have a fresh Arceus in play. You probably don't need more than one, but having the option of being able to like discard that Sharons early with the research, discard a boss or two early with the research, and then get them back with Palpet, I think is actually really, really beneficial. But you can see why Arceus Giratina is such a powerful deck. It has everything. Strong attacks, it has search options. Starbirth is an incredible V-Star power. Just let you search for any 2 cards you want at any point in the game, which is remarkably powerful. So you can finish those combos very, very easily. The energy acceleration between something like Trinity Charge, Trinity Nova, and then, like I said, just the raw power of Giratina, the draw with the Bibarel and the Squover combo. There's just so much going for this deck. The other very popular Arceus deck is Arceus Duraludon. You can see with the core list of only 46 cards, this is much more fluid in terms of how you want to build it. You have your core, but you can really take this a lot of different directions. Some people go with the Drapion, Alolan Vulpix V-Star, but really, especially at Hartford Regionals, the talk of the town was Umbreon VMAX, something that has not seen a lot of play in the past year plus, maybe. It really dropped off in use, and now we're seeing it again with Arceus Duraludon. And the idea is that it really gives you a good Lugia matchup, because a lot of Lugia decks are now playing Single Strike Urshifu VMAX, like I said they should have been since the beginning. But anyway, now they're playing a 1-1 line of Urshifu, and you can see that this deck has 3 Lost Cities. Well, between something like Starbirth, where you can go ahead and just get a Lost City at any point in the game, you go ahead, you get the Lost City, you evolve the Umbreon V into the Umbreon V Max, and that lets you use essentially Boss's Orders. Darkness Signal just says switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active. So if that Urshifu V is on the bench, you go ahead, bring it up into the active, and then you could go ahead, hit into it, KO with something like a G-Max Pulverization. A nutty combo you can pull is using the Arceus V-Star with the Hawlucha in the other common cards, or the Radiant Alakazam. So here's the scenario. Trinity Nova does 180 damage if you have a double turbo energy attached. However, we can use something like Starbirth to find us Lost City and also a Choice Belt. Now we're hitting for 210. Before we evolve the Umbreon and bring the Urshifu into the active, we can go ahead and play the Flying Entry Hawlucha, put a damage counter on 2 of our opponent's bench Pokemon. You guessed it, one of them is going to go onto the Urshifu. Or if we already done damage, we can use the Radiant Alakazam instead to move damage from something to the Urshifu. Now we bring it up into the active, and it already has damage on it. We just need 1 damage counter onto that Urshifu, because Trinity Nova with the double turbo energy and the Choice Belt does 210. It has 220 health, which is why we need the 1 damage counter that the Hawlucha can give us to knock out that Urshifu. And because we got the Lost City, it goes into the Lost Zone, not the discard pile, which means our opponent can't use something like Thornton to get the Urshifu into play anyway. It's a little bit of a convoluted play, and a lot of stuff has to happen, but it is something you can do. It is an available line, and or just use the Umbreon to bring it up, bring the Urshifu into the active. G-Max Pulverization does 220 base. You're gonna KO it like that. Either way, you really want to Lost City that Urshifu, because then they can't play the Thornton, which is why I, as an individual, me, Nick, 9-card TCG, play a 2-2 line of Urshifu. If you're expecting to run into something like Arceus Duraludon, I even like it in Arceus Giratina, but whatever. A 2-2 line of Urshifu, I think, is the way to go if this kind of stuff continues, but that's just my little tidbit. Either way, why is this so powerful? We just talked about how we can hit into things for big damage really easily by using a combination of Umbreon and Duraludon, or Umbreon Arceus with the choice belt. We're hitting 210, 2 damage onto whatever we want, and we haven't used a supporter for the turn, which means we can go ahead and play a judge if our opponent has a big hand. We can go ahead and just research. We can go ahead and do whatever we need. We need to deal with the Goodra somehow. Well, we can just go ahead and either use G-Max Pulverization and just shred right through it and not care, or we can do something like a combo of we boss something and then we go ahead and play the Umbreon and bring something else up. Like, we have so many things we can do with this deck, and it's very standard. I'm going to hit with Arceus, I'm going to power some stuff up, I'm going to bring up a big, beefy, 330 health Duraludon VMAX that says if you have any special energies, you can't even hit me back, and no matter what happens, I'm going to do 220 damage to you because I shred through all effects and abilities. It's really, really powerful. Combo that with the Umbreon for the Mew matchup, for the Gardevoir matchup. You're going to be able to bring up whatever you want in any other matchup. It's really, really cool. The Radiant Alakazam and the Hawlucha just fix a little bit of math where you need. I think it's really great. Adventurer's Discovery, Sharon's Care, Karen's Conviction, Volo, those are all really, really useful supporters in different matchups. So, because this deck is so fluid in how you want to build it, you can go ahead and try them all out and see which one works best for you and how you like to play and the things that you come across. I absolutely love this deck, but more, I love beating it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Arceus Regidrago and Arceus Goodra because they're not popular enough for me to really care about them, but very, very briefly, Arceus Regidrago, the whole idea is you get your non-Regidrago Dragon Pokemon into the discard, so you can use Regidrago's attack, which lets you copy a Dragon-type Pokemon attack from your discard and use it as Regidrago V-Star's attack. So if we want to shred, we can use something like Duraludon's attack. If we want to, we're going to go ahead and use the Goodra attack, which lets us take 80 less damage. We also take 80 less damage. We can go ahead and use something like the Giratina V-Star. We just have to hit extra hard. We want to go ahead and hit into a VMAX incredibly hard. You got Flygon. We want to snipe the bench. We got Garchomp. It's a really cool Dragon toolbox deck, but it just doesn't have a very good matchup spread, which is why it's not particularly popular. But it is a cool, fun deck that I do happen to like. And if you like Dragon-type Pokemon, it doesn't get any better than that. It's also just a very fluid deck. You can really just build it to how you like, throw the Dragon-type Pokemon that you want or that you like in there, and it's just fun, but it's not the most competitive. Again, not going to talk about Arceus Goodra a lot. It's very, very basic. Get Arceus, use Goodra, attack, tank, try to heal with the Serena, maybe this Crystal Cave. It doesn't even look like it. There's no more Hyper Potion, which this deck really, really wanted to make use of. It's just not there. And the whole idea, the reason why it doesn't really work, right, is Goodra really wants to use Moisture Star. But if you use Moisture Star, then you can't use Starburst. And if you use Starburst, you can't use Moisture Star. And honestly, you're probably going to use Starburst because you need to set up, right? You need to get your things going in order to even play the game. So you're probably going to use Starburst, and now you can't use Moisture Star like you really want to, and then the Goodra is that much less effective, which is why it kind of doesn't work. There's a lot of Duraludon running around, there's a lot of Urshifu running around, even T-Tar and Sablezard decks like that, any type of Lost Zone deck that runs a ton of escape ropes. Lost Zone Kyogre is really popular. That just absolutely crushes your deck. There's just way too much going against a deck like Arceus Goodra. Arceus Regidrago V-Star does have a V-Star power, and it's really cool because you can get away with using either V-Star power depending on what you need, and you're probably going to be okay. In a deck like this, you really want to use the Goodra V-Star power. You really want to use Moisture Star to keep that Goodra in play as long as possible and keep your opponent from taking prizes. However, because you're putting other 2 prize Pokemon into play, you're putting the Arceus, you're putting the Lumineon probably, there's just other routes that they can take. They only have to go through 1 Goodra V-Star now, and because you're not using Moisture Star, it's that much easier. So it's just not, I like it, but if you want to play Goodra, play the Lost Zone. We're going to finish up by talking about matchup spreads, and we are really only going to talk about Arceus Duraludon and Arceus Giratina. I'm not including the Drago and the Goodra because 1, they're really not popular enough for me to talk about, and 2, spoilers, the matchup spreads are pretty bad. So we can just kind of get that out of the way. So technically, we did talk about them. Anyway, Duraludon, it has some pretty decent matchups with some of the more popular decks. It has a really good Sablezard matchup. It has a really good Lost Zone deck matchup. It's slightly favored into Lugia because Arceus Duraludon decks, a lot of the Lugia decks are either running Tyrannitars, they might be running Duraludon, or they're running the 1/1 Urshifu, and we can kind of deal with that. If they have the 2/2, it becomes a lot more complicated, but really no one other than me is doing that. We have a really good Mew matchup because, again, Duraludon can wall the Mew with their double turbo energies. They have to use Max Miracle. It's not as strong. They have to burn all those power tablets. It's not as effective. Plus, we have the Umbreon to just hit into the Mew VMAX and one-shot it. So that's also something pretty cool. And we have a really good Miraidon matchup because we just do 220 all the time to everything, and we're able to just constantly one-shot their V Pokemon, and they can't one-shot us back. So that's really fun. Some of the things we struggle against is Goodra Lost Zone box because we just don't do a lot of damage. We really need the Duraludon to hit into the Goodras, but between things like the Crams and between things like I don't know, they just have ways of dealing with it. They can heal. That's kind of annoying. Again, that's why Goodra Lost Zone works so well, because the Goodra can heal, something you can't do in the Arceus version. You are split into the Urshifu and Teleon, which is really surprising. It's just a matter of, can they get around your Duraludon? Do you leave them just a Duraludon, something they can never hit because they only have special energies? Or, and they don't run Path to the Peak, so they can't even turn off your Skyscraper ability, something that Mew can do because they run a really high path count. But again, you just boss KO their Genesect, boss KO Genesect, boss KO Genesect, and that's game. And you run enough bosses to do that. Anyway, this is a matter of, can Inteleon Urshifu knock out your Arceus before you're able to set up your Duraludon? Can they work through your other prizes before you establish just a lone Duraludon and then have no other options? So, kind of interesting matchup. Giratina Lost Box, like V-Star or Star Requiem into a V-Star or VMAX Pokemon really, really sucks, especially when they're going to be able to come in and use Greninja, they're going to be able to use Sableye, they're going to be able to use Cramorant, all those kind of things. Giratina V-Star itself just hits super, super hard, so they get a Choice Belt onto that Giratina V-Star, they go Star Requiem onto a Duraludon VMAX, Lost Impact 310 onto an Umbreon VMAX, and that's the game right there in literally just 2 attacks. They don't have to do anything else, so that makes it really challenging. Gardevoir, the Duraludon isn't, it's not enough because Zacian can one-shot it. It's a little challenging, but it can do it. Gardevoir, like the Shining Arcana, they do a massive amount of damage with the single prize Pokemon. That kind of stinks. The Umbreon might put you in a little bit better of a position because you can use the Umbreon to gust things that you really want to attack and also one-shot their Gardevoir EX. So you can kind of turn off the energy recovery ability or energy acceleration ability of the Gardevoir, especially if they only have one in play. Maybe they discarded one, maybe they just prize the other one, whatever. But still a little bit challenging because you're not able to make use of your main thing for the deck, which is the Duraludon, as effectively. Arceus Giratina, again, same thing. The Giratina is just really, really annoying. They don't have to use special energies, and they can hit for a massive amount of damage and take that VMAX. And you're only taking 2 prizes, and you're still not one-shotting because 280, kind of annoying that they're able to uptrade. And also, they could potentially knock out in one hit your Pokemon, and you're never really going to one-shot theirs in return. So you don't really do well against like the Dragon Lost Zone decks, but the Turbo and the Sablezard you do really well against. And then from there, it's Do you think you're going to hit Gardevoir? Yeah, probably you're going to. Are you going to hit Arctina? Probably not. So really, you only have to worry about the Dragons and the Gardevoir, the three, I guess, the Goodra, Giratina, and Gardevoir, the 3 Gs. And then everything else you're kind of good against. So, fun. Good time. Arceus Giratina is really, really set. The only thing you don't do well against is the Italian Urshifu, because you're probably not going to one-shot, right? And so they just heal with Cheryl, and then you did all that. You lost on some energies. The Urshifu can wreck your Arceus. They can wreck some of the stuff on the bench, so that can be really challenging. They're just moving damage around with the double gunner, the yoga loop. Next thing you know, they're taking another turn, and they're just G-Max Rapid or Gale Thrusting for game. It can be really, really challenging. There aren't a ton of games played against this. 19 matches played is not a very high sample size. However, given it's not a very high sample size, the win rate is still really, really low, which leads me to believe that it might be closer to like 40-45% than it would be like, I don't know, 50 or 55%. So you're probably going to lose this one, and you're probably going to lose to the Miraidon because they might just be a little bit too fast for you. But otherwise, you're really solid into everything else. I'm sorry, my voice is getting just a little bit hoarse. I'm still recovering from a really nasty cold, so I apologize if it doesn't sound great, but the information is still the same. Arceus Giratina does really well. We already talked about why it does well into Arceus Duraludon. Everything else too. Goodra, you just knock out the Goodras. You got, you could search for the escape rope and then boss with something like the Arceus VSTAR, and then you just KO immediately into the Goodra, or you just hit really, really hard into the Goodra. You know, lost Sablezard. Makes sense. They're really not going to be able to one-shot stuff. You got the Sharons perhaps for the Arceus if they don't one-shot that. Lost Zone, again, they're just not able to deal with the Arceus and the Sharons and the V-Stars. It's really, really challenging. Lugia is pretty neutral, 51-52%. That just kind of comes down to who sets up better, who goes first kind of deal. But everything else, you're pretty favored into a Mew. Again, we already talked about previously. You're a better Judge Path deck, so if they can't set up off of the Judge, you Judge Path them, and they're not able to set up, and you know, because Mew really only wants to Judge Path after they have what they need, and also they have the option to Lost Vacuum one of their stadiums, like their Path to the Peak, and now they can use a Genesect and throw down another path. If you can stop them from doing that because you do your own Judge Path first, you're probably going to win, and you're just hitting super hard. 310 with the Giratina V-Star is massive, so that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, those are really just the two decks that I wanted to talk about. If you wanted to play an Arceus deck, the numbers say go Arceus Giratina, but the talk of the community was for sure Arceus Duraludon with Umbreon. So remember, because I don't know if Hartford results are calculated into this. Hartford just finished today, the day of recording. So tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't know when Trainer Help updates their data, like if it's real time, if it needs a day to get their stuff in. But either way, I would expect these numbers to change a little bit over the next couple of days, but try them out. Try out Arceus Duraludon and Umbreon and let me know how you do. I'm going to be making a deck profile on it pretty soon, so if you're not sure where to start, keep an eye out on the channel. We're going to have a video for you. But that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, found this informative. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all kind of stuff tells YouTube this is a good channel. Other people should watch it. Again, take all of this matchup data stuff with a grain of salt. It is not concrete. There is still a chance that a deck that has a 35% win rate can still win, right? It does win 35% of the time. All it takes is for your opponent to not set up. You draw really well. They make a misplay. You know the matchup better than they do. Whatever. There's a ton of factors that go into Pokemon. So just because you play a deck that has a hard loss to something doesn't mean you're always going to lose to it. Give it a go. Play to your outs. And yeah, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much. And I'll see you next time.